So for our next section, we get into problem-solving methods or problem-solving methodology, if you will. And we'll start with one of the most simplistic. While it is simplistic, it's highly effective and it's been used for decades, and that's the plan, do, check, act methodology. And this was really founded by someone called W. Edwards Deming. And I remember learning about Deming when I was an undergrad, taking my first kind of operations management class. And what was interesting was Deming was very very passionate about looking at process and workflows and optimizing them for maximum efficiency. Now, Deming came to the scene, and where he really kind of made himself well known was in the automotive industry. And what was interesting was Deming had many methodologies and many philosophies that were highly effective. And as he set out to prove and test the effectiveness of this, he came to the U.S. Automotive industry, and at the time this was the late 70s, I believe, when we're starting to deal with fuel crisis issues and a bunch of problems. And Deming went to the big three, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, and said, hire me, let me come in and help you. And all three said, no thanks, don't need you, you're crazy. So instead of giving up, Deming got on a plane and he went to Japan, and he ended up working with Toyota. And this is really kind of the turning point that put Toyota on the map. And suddenly Toyota started to take significant market share away from the big three US automakers. So what was interesting was all of a sudden more and more Toyotas are getting imported into the United States. The big three automakers in the US start to lose significant market share. And suddenly they have to step back and go, what on earth is going on here? And what was it? Well, it was Deming. He was over there helping Toyota in Japan figure out how to optimize their process and how to solve problems on the assembly line and just continually get more and more and more efficient. Okay, so meanwhile, Deming, his work is done in Japan. He comes back to the States, and suddenly he gets contacted. And I can't remember which U.S. manufacturer it was, but one of them reached out and said, we'd like you to come and talk to our organization and try to take a look at things and maybe help us out. And Deming said, well, that's not how I do business. If you hire me, I come in, I have full control of the organization. I see what's going on. I have access to everything, and here's what you're going to pay me. And they said, that's not how we do business. And he said, well, that's the only way I'll do business. Thank you and goodbye. As they started to see more and more deterioration, guess what? He gets a call back and says, when can you get here? So now we're in the 80s and started to see some of those changes later come about. But again, this is what they call the Deming cycle, if you will. And I've got, again, an example out there in Canvas. So plan, do, check, and act. So, of course, we sit down, we develop a plan of what we think we want to do. We actually go do it. We go back and check, did it work? And then we act accordingly. And sometimes our act is nothing. It worked, and we just need to continue to monitor. Now, this is still used today, and depending on your sector, we've added a few caveats to it, okay? So I worked for an organization that used this for IT change management, okay? So we would plan, but before we would do, the people that did the planning would have to vet it with a neutral party. So if I wanted to make a change to something technology related, the planning team would have to go out and document a very well thought out work plan. Okay, so they would have to state out every single step they would take. That neutral party outside of that core group, okay, in that business unit would review it and maybe even test it and say, okay, this is all right, you can go do it, but you need to do it in a safe place. So you can't do it in a live environment that could impact end users, in this case healthcare software, that could impact real patients. Do it in a safe environment that doesn't have real patients in it. Once you do that, if it works, come back to us and say, okay, here's what I did, here's the outcome I got. Then that's our check, right? And then the act was we would repeat that, okay? So plan, do, check, act. Very straightforward. Again, we still see this used quite heavily in many facets of business. Like I just explained, there are some caveats to it as well. So it has kind of morphed. But the most simplistic of our problem solving methods that's still in use today.